It's June 25th, 2024. I'm with John Jeckovich. We're reading his book, Their Mother's Sons. I'm on chapter 3. And chapter 3 is You're in the Army Now. We're on page 43. And up to this point, he's been to several different installations, several different camps for basic training. So here we're going to pick up, he just took a long train ride, and he ended up in Indiana.
Evansville, Indiana, Owensboro.
Yeah, only 300 miles from where he started his journey from Niagara Falls, but he's been like to 4 or 5 different camps since then, as far south as San Antonio, Texas, and where they're most recently, before they got to Indiana, they were on a 6-hour train ride, and they thought they were going to start heading west, which would have been a bad situation because that means they would have been going to California, and all the soldiers would have to be sent to the Pacific. None of the soldiers wanted to be sent to the Pacific, so they had a little celebration when they finally turned out to see that the train was going northeast, and which means they'd be sent to the European front lines, which they thought was much better than going to the Pacific.
Which is kind of ironic in itself, one or the other, you know.
They're both bad situations, yes.
They were both bad.
Both bad situations. Well, give me your dog tag number, and that'll be the code to start reading.
Dog tag number?
I'll need your dog tag before I start.
4292965.
All right, here we go. That night I rested in the upper berth with the emotion of the train jarring my memory. The morning roll call. After the 4th hour driving, we approached an Army camp that we're familiar with. They said restricted area. Signs profusely about the proverbial barbed wire fence had sprouted its ugly head. Sure enough, in a few short minutes, we pulled into the main camp entrance. Besides the barricaded entrance was a large sign in blue and gold, Camp Breckenridge, home of the 75th Infantry.
75th, huh?
There are only several hundred of us in my situation. The reason I was moved out here was a hypothetical fashion. As the trucks approached the headquarters, the sound of military band could be heard. Sure enough, they're performing for our benefit. My platoon leader, 2nd Lieutenant Conti, was a draftee, as most of us, a product of the Lower East Side of New York City. Having taken ROTC training in college, studying for an engineering degree, he was drafted into the Army in his 3rd year. He was a savvy, no-nonsense type officer. There was also Private Graham from another squad, an ex-policeman from Manhattan. Retreat would be at 1700 hours, a much more ceremonial at the other camps. We all had to be in Class A uniforms, accompanied with our individual weapons. Unit flags were also on display, as well as the stars and stripes. What I particularly liked was the playing of the taps by a long bugler while we stood at attention. Retreat was a ceremonial event. It instilled in us a sense of country and obligation to serve it to its best of our abilities. After retreat, it was only a matter of waiting for chow and then some free time until lights out at 2300 hours. After chow, I'd spend my time writing letters in the day room, visiting PX, or taking a movie at the Post theaters. In the trips to the PX or to the theater, I usually went with my newfound friends, Lane and Larson.
Who?
Lane and Larson. Lane and Larson, who were in the 2nd platoon and billeted in adjoining barracks. Both Lane and Larson were several years older than I, and I both were married with 2 children. We had much in common and got around quite well. Lane was from a nearby city close to where I lived and was an electronics assembler for General Electric. He would state often how it was his misfortune to end up in the infantry when he had a marketable
Here's a
skill.
candy, John.
Huh?
You want a candy?
No, thanks, no
Oh, you gotta
thanks.
stay awake there. You're falling asleep there.
He
Here.
expected to be in a single corps, or at least service branch, with his electrical background. Larson was optimistic. One of the 3 of us always seemed the positive, cheerful side of an issue. He was from Minnesota and a jeweler by trade. He did not own his own jewelry store, but worked for a large in-house jeweler in Minnesota. Looking at his robust appearance, I would never have thought of him as a jeweler, tinkering with minute objects and diamonds.
It's Larson.
What?
Larson.
Larson was a large, stockily built man.
How old was Larson?
Huh?
Let's see.
How old was Larson?
50.
Oh, okay.
Larson was a large, stockily built man of Swedish descent. With a characteristic Swedish good humor, I could always count on Larson to cheer me up. I felt downhearted or moody. He would emulate a Swedish accent and then repeat something that Sergeant Baker would say, or try and bolster our determination to be good soldiers. I envy them both. They had an ideal squad leaders who took an interest in their well-being, unlike Sergeant Baker. Larson and Lane would talk about their private lives at home with their wives and children. I would mostly listen and not volunteer much information about my family life. They would always take my reluctance to talk about my home life as a matter of routine for the younger set. We were too busy carousing about, having a good time, to spend much time at home. I always reinforced that assumption. There was an absence of my truthfulness that bound us close together. I enjoyed listening to them about their antics of their children and the times they enjoyed together as a family. I also was envious and put to my attention at home into a clearer, sharper perspective. Also, I gained much insight into the fact that all families have problems and how they confront these problems and some of them that distinguishes families and family relationships. We spent an evening discussing the events in the PX over a Coke or in the barracks. It usually was at the barracks that they somewhat more subdued crowd than I had been in my barracks. All in all, I enjoyed our discussions and learned a great deal, not entirely about the Army life, but about a good old-fashioned living and being around people who cared very much. Okay, now we're moving over to Chapter 4.
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4, page 54.
So just kind of synopsis of chapter 3.
Chapter 3 is very simple. Mr. Jeckovich just went from base to base to base, 4 or 5 different bases.
In training.
In training, as far south as San Antonio, Fort Houston, and then they took a train ride, and they thought they were in a long, long train ride, and they thought they were going west to California. But ironically, no one knew where they were going, because if you asked the superiors, no one would give you an answer. It was
John,
always,
they wouldn't tell you where you were going?
Huh?
They wouldn't tell you where you were going?
No.
and so he ended up at Camp Breckenridge
Here, do you
in
want a sip of
Indiana.
cranberry juice?
No, thanks. Okay.
At Camp Breckenridge. And so now he'll be there for a few months of training. But what's nice about this, he gets passes, weekend passes to Owensboro, Kentucky. Owensboro, Kentucky. So this chapter is chapter 4. And it's entitled.
More questions.
He's not going to answer.
What's the title?
It's entitled Passes to Owensboro. Did you mostly go to Owensboro on weekends?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all you do. As I've been at Camp Breckenridge for several weeks, I felt confident that we were permanent since there was no shipping orders the entire time I had been there. I felt assured this was my last stop and I would ship out with the division in a matter of few short months. I did not despair at this thought, nor did I dwell upon it for any length of time. I came to the conclusion I was fortunate enough to be part of an organization that made me feel like I belonged and gave me a sense of personal satisfaction and pride of being part of it. By most standards, a good majority of the people here were staunch and resolute, moral fiber and integrity, something you would look for very closely in a combat setting. The men in my squad, with the exception of Spotsta, Gaffney, and Sergeant Baker, were all the same caliber as the rest of the company. As I did not socialize with most of the individuals outside of the regular duty day, it concerned me greatly what the reaction would be when we entered a combat situation. We were scheduled for the gas mask drill and instructions this morning. Our masks were clumsy and awkward to carry, slung over our left shoulders, and I hope that I never have to avail myself to one. Do you remember the gas mask drill?
Yeah.
What'd you think of it?
Well, they put you in a room and you had a mask on your shoulder. They didn't have it on your face. And then they turned the gas on and you put the mask on.
What was your thoughts about that? Did it make you sick?
The what?
Did it make you sick?
No, it didn't make you sick, but you had to be aware of what they were doing. Gas hits you fast.
And how long did you stay in the room for?
Pardon?
How long were you in the room for?
Half an hour.
The most were some.
They wanted us to stay in the room without the mask on, and then stay in the room with the mask on.
Did some of the guys were panicking?
No, they were getting wheezy and that, but they never passed out.
Okay. We were scheduled for a gas mask drill and instructions this morning. Our masks were clumsy and awkward to carry, slung over our left shoulders, and I hope I never have to avail myself of one. Entering a large windowless metal building, a squad at a time, without our gas mask on, we were giving instructions on operations of the mask and how to protect us from a gas attack. Did you ever have a gas attack during an actual war?
No, never.
Was there much of that in an actual war?
What?
Was there much of a gas attack in an actual war? Was that common or very?
No, it was more common in the First World War.
Okay. Our instructor then told us not to put on our mask until we got commanded to do so. This was extremely important so as we could afford the experience of an actual gas attack. What did the gas smell like?
It smelled sweet.
Sweet? Was it sickening sweet?
Huh?
Was it sickening sweet?
No, it wasn't sickening, it was just overpowering.
Was it on your clothes for weeks afterwards?
Yeah, you had it on your clothes. Yeah, when I worked with my uncle, I used to go to Carbide and I picked up all those scents.
Oh, when you worked at Carbrundum, you pictured those scents. When you worked at Carbrundum, those scents were familiar to you.
Yeah.
That's cool. As the white clouds of gas filled the room, our eyes began to water, our throats became parched and dry as we started to cough, and we were giving the command to down our mask. What a relief. We then circled the room 3 times and then exited the room through a small doorway into fresh air. Who gave you the command to put the gas mask on?
Probably the staff sergeant.
Was the staff sergeant in the room with no mask also?
Yeah, well, he was with us in the room, yeah.
We had no gas mask on, right?
No, he was talking to us. You can't talk with a gas
Okay,
mask on.
so he was probably used to that.
Huh?
The staff sergeant was probably used to the gas in the gas testing room.
Yeah, you never get used to gas, come on. Gas is gas.
Okay. Most of us were coughing and squeezing and wiping our teary eyes. A few fell down to their knees, heaving everything they have eaten in that morning. It was a harmless tear gas, but quite an irritant. I could smell it in my clothes and taste it in my mouth several hours later. As I completely lost my sense of taste and smell, a gas attack would be enduring or a fatal experience. The officers did not accompany us most on our training exercises, with the exception of Lieutenant Conti, our platoon leader. The only times that the other officers were visible were on hikes or night problems and occasionally retreat. Captain Goodnight made the rare appearance of retreat on a Saturday morning. Our only contact with the executive officer, Lieutenant Cummings, was when we had a problem with our paperwork, such as insurance allotment or an emergency furlough. Sergeant Whalen was absent from the same scene most of the time. Our only contact with him was the visit through the orderly room on company business. As with the majority of officers, Sergeant Whalen would at times make an appearance at a retreat or rarely a training exercise. Our only contact with him on a social basis was visited him to the PX, as was usual the case. He did not know most of us personally. Sergeant Rupert was also in this category. He would never accompany us on hikes or field problems. He would also never give us lectures or issued any instructions per se. His wit and charm made up his inadequacies. It was not usual for him to stroll through the barracks after retreat and converse with the troops on a one-to-one basis. He would tell tall tales at times, about his past Army experiences and places and even events that he had witnessed while in the service. Sergeant Rupert had been in the First World War and served overseas in France as an infantryman. He knew he had seen some action, and after the war he decided to stay in the regular army. Never having been married, he had done considerable traveling while serving with the Army. He was stationed at every Army installation at least once, including the ones overseas. We wondered what decision be made about him relative to shipping out with us, since he was considerably up in age. We relished his company and his good, sound advice about the Army and life in general. Sergeant Baker had been in the Army a little over 2 years, having been drafted when he became 18 of age. He did not have much formal education, but he took his limited duties seriously, as well as his stripes. After retreat, he would mostly stay in his room on the second floor of the barracks, which he shared with several other squad leaders. He did not give many lectures, and the few he did give were disasters. It made you uneasy to listen to him. No one got anything out of them. He associated them with another sergeant, Sergeant Bronson, from the 2nd Platoon, and like him, a product of one of the southern states. Most of the cadre joined the 75th while in maneuvers in Louisiana. as was the case of the men from the Air Corps and ASTP, as with the 106th at Swift. The unit had been under strength in cadre and enlisted men. Consequently, we were brought up to strength with the enlisted men from our other units, namely Air Corps. I do not know how the officers were selective, but a future experience would indication they were chosen in some haphazard manner and enlisted men as non-coms. In essence, what you had in Breckenridge in the formation of the 75th was a cadre of non-coms with a regular high school education at best. In comparison, were newly enlisted men with a higher education of at least 2 years of college or more. There was an inverse relationship, since the better educated personnel were the receiving end of orders, and the lesser educated people were giving orders and getting all the acknowledgement. Many people resented this situation, but they were helpless in rectifying it. With leaders like Sergeant Baker and Bronson, they resented it all the more. None of the cadre, including the officers, with the exception of Sergeant Rubert, had any combat experience. Coupled with the lack of education, there was no basis for their intense existence as leaders in the combat unit. The other men felt, as I did, that without actual combat experience, our non-coms were not fulfilling their roles as leaders in the actual assault.
They pulled them out of the ASTP.
Hey, do you think
They were all out of the ASTP.
Do you think you should move a little bit back in that chair? Are you too far forward on that chair, or do you need to move back a little bit?
What?
Are you all right on that chair? It looks like you're kind of
No, I'm on that chair. What's the matter?
Okay, it looks like you're close to the edge, that's what I'm saying.
Huh?
I just thought you might have been close to the edge.
No, I'm on the full chair.
You're okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want no problems, you know that. Some of the men approached me, Lieutenant Conti. How was Lieutenant Conti?
Typical New Yorker.
You didn't care for him?
He was out of, he had ROTC in college. He was in college.
Okay. But he never seen combat?
Huh? No. They're all greenhorns. Except what's his name, the old guy, but he's not going anywhere.
Want to give it to him now?
Wilbur, he's not going anywhere.
Mail call. Mail call.
This looks like.
Your mail call. Mail. Mail call.
This is all junk mail.
Ask my father if he wants his junk mail.
You want your junk mail, John?
Who is this?
I don't know. I never seen it. You just got the mail.
We love watching your show.
That's great. That's nice. Where's it from?
We are learning a lot of history. Thank you. The act, I don't know what the hell that is. I can't read it.
Let me look at it. Let me tell you where it's from.
The art jam stickers or what? Here.
All right, let me see where it's from. Do you want your junk, man? There's flyers there. You want the flyers?
The Art Vandersons.
The Art Vandersons.
Family.
The Art Vandersons family, and they're from
Denmark. Denmark, John.
Where?
Denmark.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want me to put it in the book?
Yeah, put it in the book, yeah.
Denmark. Were you in Denmark before?
Have I been to Denmark? No.
Oh, okay.
Nope, never in the army, never went to Denmark.
Okay. Okay, let me keep reading. As our training progressed, we began to undergo actual simulated combat conditions. One of the mock conditions was an infiltration course under simulated combat conditions.
4 minutes.
Okay, in this exercise, they were directed into trench-like path leading to a deeper one in which they crouched down while waiting for our turn to go over the top of the embankment. In that path of firing a machine gun, the frightening part was forcing yourself to go over the top of the mound in the hail of .30 caliber tracers and rounds spinning around the barrel of the machine gun. One out of five rounds with a tracer, and they are all like red neon strips floating over your head, and emphasis that they were live rounds that could kill. So that maneuver,
Infiltration course, yeah.
that training, you're seeing the tracers going over your head.
Yeah, 3 feet, first of your head, yeah. We had to come out of, a trench.
If one,
The big thing was getting out, just staying in that trench and go over, get out and up, and haul over the fence and go lay on the ground. You had to get out of that,
if one of the tracers hit you, would that be deadly?
oh yeah, that was the armor piercing.
So it's just a bullet, but with a tracing device.
Right?
A tracer is a regular bullet, but with a tracing device in it. So you can see the red.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never knew that. We approached the ready position with our light packs and our individual weapons. The instructor told us to keep as low as possible and crawl through the entire course, which was about 200 yards in length. Also, we were told to keep out of the craters scattered around the ground, as there were explosive charges in them that would go off at any time. The noise was deafening, and had several machine guns firing rapidly, and the explosive charges going off intermittently. There were also smoke covering the entire course to make it more realistic. It was raining and wind picked up considerably. As I went over the top, I hugged the ground as closely as possible. The tracers seemed frighteningly low, as I could hear and see them whirling menacing over my head. Visibility was almost zero, and I had a difficult time seeing and avoiding the craters.
1 minute and 52 seconds.
Okay. I had a hard time keeping up my momentum as I crawled, and since the ground had become saturated from the rain, I tried to keep my weapon fairly dry and the muzzle free from mud, ready to fire it as it would be inspected at the end of the course. Several yards into the course, I was completely soaked, covered with mud. My vision was blurred. I attempted to keep my mud out of my eyes. My only thought was to keep on going and stay out of the craters. It seemed like every time I passed one of them, the charge would go off and I would get showered with dirt and rock and debris. The sound was ear-shattering, and since there was also much shouting, it frustrated me considerably, as I could not make any of it out. Minutes? I must have been crawling
48 seconds.
all of 10 minutes. It seemed like hours when I saw up ahead the trench that we'd crawl into to get out of the line of fire. I fixed my gaze on the trench and maneuvered myself around the depressions. As we got closer to the trench, I got a glimpse of the machine guns spitting out their deadly fire.
So this whole exercise was what? Just,
Infiltration course.
yeah, infiltration course?
Yeah,
Realistic, yeah.
it was very realistic.
Wow,
Seconds?
11. So just wait.
Yeah. I got a glimpse of the machine guns spitting out their deadly fire.
Yeah.
We should have